I think my husband fathered his best friend's children, and now one of them is attracted to my daughter. I'm a 42-year-old woman. My husband Luke is 43. And so is Amy. I met Luke in college, but he's known Amy since they were about 7. They did everything together and understood each other implicitly. They were best friends. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings to each other. They did everything together and understood each other implicitly. They were best friends. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings to each other. Naturally I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Amy and her closeness to Luke. But they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about. That their bond was not romantic, and had never been sexual. That Amy really was just the sister that Luke never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any and all insecurity I had about Amy. She became my friend too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I have built a wonderful life together, and we always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, we still saw a lot of Amy, and I was fine with that. I've passed many a night on the town trying to help Amy find a man, as she has always lamented how she is unlucky in love. Luke and I started to have children after we were married, and at around the same point, so did Amy. For further context, my children are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children are Tom, 17, Kylie, 14, and twins, Adam and Jenna, 9. Now Amy was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating but not consistently. As Luke and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically Amy would find herself pregnant as well. It happened a few times and Luke and I never knew anything about the father's in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Amy was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. Luke agreed this was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Amy too knew the paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't pester her. Of course she had us to support her, so there was that. While Amy never asked for any help, of course Luke was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely and Luke also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Amy, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy all stereotypes, they are the kindest and gentlest people, so we were able to support Amy. To get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way. None of us did. She needed help and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly, that is a long story that I don't want to get into because even I don't fully understand her reasoning. But it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control, and that whatever came of that choice she would accept. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it was that degree of significance to Amy. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once but I'm still not clear on why. Of course Amy being Luke's best friend since they were kids. It's not unreasonable that sometimes they hang out together while I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Amy one-on-one as well, though Luke does it more. She was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and at times sleeping over there. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps. But for years they presented as being buddies. Like siblings. I didn't pick up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one can expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house, our home is decently sized. But even we don't have the room for 8 kids. But we made sure Amy's children met ours from a young age. And they always got along and strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good. Especially if I'm right. And they share blood. I've been dawdling getting to the main point. Yes. I have come to suspect that Luke fathered at least one of Amy's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing. And he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Amy, and I have to confess I cannot remember seeing her with any real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties, I would try to be her wingman, and so on. But nothing ever seemed to really happen, so when she got pregnant the first time I was curious. When it happened again, and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret fella, who she didn't want us to know about, for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him. Especially from her children. After Carter, our youngest, was born, Luke and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Amy's twins had come just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, Luke and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Amy never got pregnant again, after the twins. Is it a coincidence that Luke had a vasectomy and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know. But Luke would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her, but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but Luke has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me or our children, not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Mamie's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could call it noble. But it combines with a lot of other little things. There is appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved, and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Amy's children, they certainly look like they could be Luke's. Kylie has a very unusual allergy that Luke also has. The twins look very much like him, Adam in particular. The older Tom has gotten, the more of Luke I can see in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that Luke is a different race than Amy. And Amy's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as Luke. Doesn't mean Luke has to be the father. But it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Amy or Luke. I don't want to be the bad guy, and guilty or innocent, I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids, or Amy's kids? Either way, Luke continues to spend time with Amy and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I have hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention, and wish he wouldn't give as much to Amy. But he either missed my cues or pretended that he missed them. I don't want to push this idea that he's favoring her, because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I can't shake the feeling that Luke and Amy have been intimate before, likely numerous times. So far as I know, Amy never really wanted to be a mother, either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world she instantly fell in love with them. But motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity. In the grand scheme of things, when we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children. But it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So I don't think this is a case of Luke just giving Amy children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity. That would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Kaylee's allergy was discovered. But I dismissed it. It got worse after the twins were born. I dismissed it. Then Amy stopped having babies. I wanted to feel reassured by that. But Luke had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights that I wished the twins were younger, that they had come along after Luke's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time. But I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since, technically, I could be wrong. Except now I'm very afraid. Because in the last few months we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie, my eldest. She's really blossomed over these last few years and become quite the outspoken beauty. So I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention. But Tom asking her out had me thrown. Sophie said no. But only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating. And she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest, and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk to me about it. Bless my girl, she did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Tom. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly. She just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to. And I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was he's too old for you, which he is. But it's not really about that. When Amy and Luke heard, I was so very curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Sophie, and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved and taken that as proof that I was wrong about something going on between them. Wrong about who fathered Amy's children. But the ambiguity continued. They took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Sophie want it more. He's probably right about that. Amy seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up. But I don't know, she just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Tom would spend more and more time with Sophie. They would be alone, or with other friends, anytime they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Tom is crazy about Sophie, and wants to be with her. And he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and noticed his eye wandering many times. And while I'm doing everything I can to kill this budding romance in the crib, I also am feeling somewhat powerless. Sophie hasn't outwardly defied me. She's still just hanging out with Tom as friends. So forcing them to stop spending time together would be unreasonable, and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating, and doing God knows what when no one is looking. I've observed Tom being rather handsy with Sophie, and she presents no objection whatsoever, and I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Sophie that Tom is like her brother, but if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I always saw Amy and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Amy's kids more as best friends. The problem is, of course, that if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years and I'm right about the paternity of Amy's mixed children, then Tom and Sophie cannot be anything more than friends under any circumstances. End of discussion. It can never happen. I feel powerless to stop it though. Luke has apparently talked to Tom about this, as has Amy, but he is unrelenting and he won't give up on Sophie. I think she enjoys that attention and devotion. Tom has also confronted me and asked why I'm so against this when I know him very well, and I know he would be good to Sophie. I didn't know what to say other than to fall back on her being too young for him. But that won't work forever. If, God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, then they'll pursue this with abandon, and once they're legal adults, there's nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke agree with me that Tom cannot date Sophie, but that's all they've really done. They feel just as powerless as me to prevent teen love. It genuinely feels sometimes like they've just given up, and will bury their heads in the sand about this. Just do nothing and hope the feelings pass as Tom and Sophie get older. Which, yeah, they're in high school. It's unlikely Tom will be in love with Sophie forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes. Something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close. This close to screaming at Luke that all this wouldn't be happening if he hadn't cheated on me these many years. If he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now Luke's son wants to fuck our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows she's just his childhood friend, and it's all Luke and Amy's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I am wrong, I'm a horrible monster who accused the love of my life, and one of my closest friends of doing something horrible. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've become over the last several years is gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset even if Luke and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Sophie's eventually going to sleep with Tom and be his girlfriend. And I'm low-key terrified it will happen sooner than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature. But what if it doesn't? What if they wind up being together for years? What if they marry, want to get pregnant someday? And if I tell Sophie the truth about Amy's kids, then everyone else finds out too, and that's going to ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father, and their Aunt Amy. Luke is Owen's hero. I don't even want to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Amy's children? They are innocent. They didn't ask for this, they don't control where they came from. And I don't want to hurt them. Admittedly, I'm not happy with Tom at the moment. A week ago I saw him put his hand on Sophie's butt, and I wanted to knock his teeth out. But even he doesn't deserve to be burdened by the knowledge that it's his half-sister he's been fantasizing about. It's all so fucked up and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time now. I thought I could live with it. But this business with Tom and Sophie has me distressed. Comments. Comment 1. Honestly, do you really think he's sleeping on the sofa? Why is he sleeping over there if there is nothing going on? You go to your friend's house and talk and then you go back home to your wife and kids, eh? WTF. What about your kids? He doesn't give a shit about any of you. Time to have another chat with the lawyer. And you really need to get more angry about this. You are way too understanding. This woman has wrecked all your lives, and even your in-laws have been suspecting the same all along. Comment 2. I am here for this drama. Happy to report that I watched this Vogue episode yesterday. Thanks to those of you who suggested it, and provided links. It was harder for me to keep track of all the characters, and it obviously centered more on the crime. Because there's a murder. I like that this story doesn't have anyone dying, and the twist in this story, with the kids knowing, is excellent. Update. Dailary. I didn't expect to have another update so quickly, but after posting my first update I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with Luke, and whatever that meant for him. To hell if that meant all of the kids learned of the situation. She needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So I discreetly kept her out of school. We went back home, to our home last night, and this morning I dropped everyone off and saved Sophie for last. Before driving right past her school, and telling her that we needed to talk. Always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent. But I was quick to establish that she was not in trouble, but she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting, why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently explained that because of Luke's closeness to Amy and Tom's resemblance to him, I had come to suspect that perhaps Luke and Amy were intimate at some point over the years. If that was true, and there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, that would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while, before she finally said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's and this is extremely important. So I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us and Sophie had me relay what I told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare. And read it. That's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least they had strongly suspected. Apparently Tom has overheard conversations that are questionable, as well as overhearing the sounds of sex from Amy's room, sounds he would just as soon forget, but all signs point to Amy's lover having been Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with them. She could also see a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They agreed that, because of Kaylee's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kylie was Luke's daughter, the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom could be Luke's kid himself. The math led them to the same places as me. So Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love. They never were. They're still just best friends. But they had the same instinct as me, that they didn't want to blow up our entire family and social unit without more direct evidence, which Tom has been working on acquiring. And though Sophie very badly wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant, because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault, and that I loved her very much. So the bottom line is, Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat, to force Luke and Amy to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool out of me. I also think it was Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive. So they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation I've witnessed, every inappropriate touch, all staged, apparently, and for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Sophie Tom expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, that kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Tom confronting me that one time about why can't I date Sophie was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned at how sneaky they've been. But honestly, I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent, I guess, but they apparently already knew that they're likely related. They didn't blink at all when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together, when Tom mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter before. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, shrugged it off. She is. But so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Either way, the question now is, where to go from here? We have to figure that out. I will say that it is such a relief to have told Sophie, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom in my corner as well, means a lot to me. And even though I basically just got it absolutely confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway. So now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DN, so I can compare it to Luke's, and both he and Sophie advised me not to tell Luke and Amy when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right.